All right, let's dive into one of the most important documents in American history, the Bill of Rights. Now, these first 10 amendments to the Constitution, they're not just some dusty old piece of paper. Think of them as a user's guide to your freedom. And the story of how we got them starts with a pretty big problem in the original Constitution.
So you have to ask yourself, why do we even have a Bill of Rights in the first place? Well, when the U.S. Constitution was first written back in 1787, a lot of people read it and saw this huge, glaring hole. There was a critical piece missing. So what was it?
That missing piece? It was a leash. There were no clear limits on the government's power. I mean, the new Constitution set up this really powerful federal government, but it didn't list out the specific rights that the government absolutely couldn't touch. And this sparked a massive debate. People started wondering, did we just fight a war to get rid of a king, only to create a new government that could become just as powerful?
And this debate basically split the country's founders into two teams. You had the Federalists on one side. They were all for a strong national government, and they were like, look, it's common sense. If we didn't give the federal government a specific power, then obviously it belongs to the states or the people. But the anti-Federalists, they were not buying it. They were really worried about a powerful central government and demanded, we need a list of rights in writing to protect us. You could say the Federalists built this super powerful car, but the anti-Federalists were the ones yelling, hey, where's the emergency brake?
So things were pretty much at a standstill. And this is where our main character, if you will, enters the story. A guy named James Madison steps up. He's got a brilliant compromise to break the deadlock and get this Constitution passed. He's going to figure out a way to protect liberty inside this new system.
So James Madison, who was a congressman from Virginia at the time, he took on the job of writing these amendments. His goal was crystal clear: put a fence around the federal government's power and protect people's natural rights. You know, things like freedom of speech and religion. And he wasn't starting from zero. He had blueprints. He was looking at huge historical documents like the Magna Carta from England and even his own state's Virginia Declaration of Rights.
Now, Madison's first idea was pretty bold. He didn't want to just staple a list of rights to the end of the Constitution. He actually wanted to go in and edit the original document itself, sort of weave these protections right into the text where they made the most sense. But that idea, it hit a brick wall, hard. A representative named Roger Sherman basically stood up and said, whoa, hold on. Congress can't just rewrite the Constitution. All we can do is propose additions. And that one objection, right there, is why we have amendments tacked on at the end of the Constitution instead of a totally rewritten document. Okay, so they figured out how they were going to do it, but the next challenge was actually getting it passed. Madison's list of proposals had to run this whole gauntlet of debates, changes, and votes, not just in Congress, but in all the states too.
And this journey was a total political marathon. In August of 1789, the House starts out by approving 17 amendments. The very next month, the Senate takes that list and chops it down to 12. Then came the real test. They sent those 12 out to the states for approval. It took more than 2 years, but finally, on December 15, 1791, Virginia cast the deciding vote. Just like that, 10 of those amendments became the law of the land, and the Bill of Rights was officially born.
So that's the origin story. But what did we actually get out of it? What are these 10 rights? Let's take a quick tour. We'll break them down into a couple of key areas that affect your life right now.
We have to start with the big one, right? The First Amendment. This thing is the absolute bedrock of what it means to be free to express yourself in the United States. It's what lets you think, speak, and believe what you want.
And the First Amendment is an absolute powerhouse. It jams 5 huge rights into one. It protects what you say, what you believe, and what the press can report on. But it's not just about what's in your head. It also protects your right to act on your beliefs. You can gather with other people peacefully, and you can tell the government officially that you wanted to change things. Okay, so that covers your rights out in the public square. This next group of amendments moves into your private life. These are all about protecting your home, your stuff, and you personally from the government getting too nosy. Yeah, just think of these next 3 amendments as a big shield around your personal space. The Second Amendment protects the right to bear arms. The third, which was a huge deal back then, says the government can't just make you house soldiers in your home. And the Fourth Amendment, that's your powerful protection against the government searching you or your stuff without a very good reason and a warrant.
But what happens if you're accused of a crime? Well, the Bill of Rights sets up some absolutely critical protections to make sure you're treated fairly by the legal system. This is what we call due process.
And these safeguards are so important. The Sixth Amendment says you get a speedy, public trial, so they can't just lock you away forever without a hearing. The Fifth Amendment says you can't be tried for the same crime twice, that's double jeopardy, and it gives you the right to remain silent. And finally, the Eighth Amendment protects you from crazy high fines and cruel punishments.
All right, we've covered 8 of the 10 amendments, but these last 2, they might just be the most profound of all. They work like these giant, powerful safety nets to make sure government power stays limited and that the people's rights stay broad.
So, the Ninth Amendment. This one deals with a big worry the founders had. They were afraid that if they listed out a bunch of rights, people in the future might think those were the only rights they had. This amendment makes it super clear that's not the case.
And the takeaway here is huge. It basically says that just because a right isn't written down here in this list doesn't mean you don't have it. The Ninth Amendment confirms that you have tons of other rights. It's an incredible statement about just how big individual liberty really is.
And that brings us to the grand finale, the 10th Amendment. This one gets right to the heart of the balance of power between the federal government, the states, and the people themselves. This right here is the core principle of what's called federalism. The 10th Amendment is a clear statement. If the Constitution doesn't specifically hand a power over to the federal government, then that power belongs to the states or ultimately to the people. It's kind of like the ultimate check on federal power. So there you have it. It all started with a heated debate over a missing piece of the Constitution, and it gave us this foundational list of liberties that shapes our country every single day. Which leaves us with one final thought for you. Looking at this list, written over 200 years ago, which one of these rights do you think is the most important one to have today?